Alrighty, happy Halloween. Welcome back. I got my cross over here in case the vampires try to attack me while I'm trying to expose them for you guys. I got some mirrors behind me. So it tries to sneak up. See those mirrors back there? Dracula don't show up in mirrors. Did you know that? Did you know that? They don't like garlic either. Did you know? Did you know that? You probably know that. You know how you kill a vampire? Stake through the heart. And in this movie, you got to cut its head off too. This isn't a Buffy the Vampire Slayer deal where you like put the wood in the heart and they dust. It's not like that. In Dracula world, you got to cut the head off too. Stake through the heart, cut the head clean off. That's what you got to do. All right. So I've been watching movies in the Halloween lead up, my son and I have been watching. My son's 12 now, so he can kind of dip a toe into scary movies. And I've been catching up myself on things I haven't seen in a while. In the holiday spirit. I mean, it's Halloween. I know a lot of Orthodox people are like not into Halloween. So sorry, I am, because I'm an American or whatever. I don't think it's demonic. I think it's just this time of year, things are dying all around. Remembrance of death is an essential part of the Orthodox ethos. So that's what Halloween is. Anyways, so I watched It. Remember the old It? It. 1990, 91. The TV with Tim Curry as Pennywise. What else did we watch? We've been watching a bunch of scary movies. So we watched Dracula. And I hadn't seen it in a while. I was like, man, this movie is super Orthodox. I should make a video about this. So that's what we're going to do. Now, we're talking about the 1992 Francis Ford Coppola, Bram Stoker's Dracula. Bram. Again, I'm an American, so I don't care about your Bram Stoker. It's Bram Stoker. Bram Stoker's Dracula, 1992, Francis Ford Coppola. Now, this is one of my all-time favorite movies, without a doubt. Certainly anybody would grant Francis Ford Coppola as one of the great directors of the 20th century. At least I don't think that's contentious. Apocalypse Now. Godfather. Didn't he direct Godfather? I'm pretty sure he did. But this movie is very not Francis Ford Coppola-ish. It's very sumptuous and very sort of romantic in its aesthetic. And for me, this movie has always been one of my favorites. When I was a kid, I remember when I was like 8, 1992, I would have been about 6 or 7. And when this movie came out, my mom had the book, like the movie adaptation with the movie poster on the cover, right? And the book had an insert in the middle of stills from the film. And I remember getting a hold of this thing when I was 6. Well, I guess I was 7. And first of all, vampires loomed large in my internal fearscape as a child. Werewolves didn't bother me. It wasn't witches. It was vampires was always my number one spooky fright thing. Zombies to some extent. The undead, I guess. But vampires certainly, because something about, unlike zombies, vampires had this kind of facade of erudition, sophistication, intelligence, whatever, but it's a totally hollow facade masking pure evil. But anyways, vampires loomed large for me in my psychological world. Anyways, so I got a hold of this Dracula book, and man, the images from the insert, like the photo stills, just, I mean, it really lodged into my brain and really like, I shouldn't be saying this. My mom's going to watch this and she's going to feel bad because she's like, oh, I left Dracula laying around to traumatize my son. That's not what I'm saying. Like it was like appealing and scary. Like it really touched my psyche in a deep way. For years, I had this kind of Dracula phobia about that movie. I really had that movie as a thing of like, it really would scare me, like I don't want to watch that, And I finally did watch it when I was, I don't know, 14 or something. And it wasn't scary. I could, not only could I handle it, and so I felt like all proud of myself, but also I was like, I loved it. I loved the movie. I loved the sumptuousness and this movie, the set design and the costume design and the cinematography, the cinnamon spiced photography. It's just really beautiful. It's just gorgeous movie making. And it's great because, this is right on the brink of like, Jurassic Park, Terminator 2, all this kind of like big CGI breakthroughs in movie making. But Coppola he just used really straight old school camera effects, optical, like old school optical stuff to do weird, creepy effect shots. And which you would think would be kind of cringy, because he kind of like, he uses shots that kind of imitate, effects from old cinema. And you think it might be a little cringe, because the movie takes place in the 19th century or whatever, and it's got this kind of old aesthetic, but it is extremely effective because it's done very tastefully. So anyways, always been one of my favorite movies. I watched the movie again, and it's like, this is a straight up and down, Christian Orthodox story. So I thought we'd go through some of this and just kind of do some analysis here. Happy Halloween. Okay. So a little character rundown. All right. First of all, Dracula is more or less, I'm sure most of you know this, Dracula is more or less based off Vlad the Impaler, who was, this is in the era, this is in the, late 1400s. This is fall of Constantinople era. The fall of Eastern Christendom. And Vlad the Impaler was one of these guys fighting he was in the Order of the Dragon, which was this, not a secret society like the Bavarian Illuminati, but like a society of princes and nobles throughout Romania, Hungary, Eastern Christendom, that united and put their efforts together in order to fend off the Ottomans, to fend off, the various invading Muslim forces that were swamping the Christian empires at the time. It's a real guy, Vlad the Impaler, and had a kind of a reputation for cruelty and horror. Obviously, liked to impale people. It's not just a cute name. And this real figure was a member of the Order of the Dragon, and he took his name, meaning son of dragon. I guess his father was sort of the first initiate into this order. So he took his name, son of dragon, which is some, in some language, you end up with, Dracula. So Vlad the Impaler's name really was Dracula, like literally. So that is this character in the movie. Now, I don't know. I haven't read the book. I haven't read Bram Stoker's Dracula, the book, since high school. I don't really remember if this movie is faithful to the book or anything. So this is straight up going off the movie. Okay. So Gary Oldman is Dracula, right? This count based on Vlad the Impaler. Okay. Now, his thing is we'll watch or talk through this opening scene in a minute. He goes off to fight these armies successfully, but while he's gone, the Turks, whoever he's fighting against, they do a little bit of trickery as a bit of revenge, and they send a message to his queen or his wife saying that he died in battle. And she's so despondent about this, apparently, that she throws herself into the river. Dracula comes back from battle and finds that his beloved queen is dead. And he throws a rager in his little chapel here. You can see him. That's him there. And there's his priest in the back. I love it because the priest in this movie, played by Anthony Hopkins, almost bears a kind of slight resemblance to my priest. It's one of those fun little things. But he goes and into church and has an all-out rager and basically renounces God and summons all the powers of evil and yada yada yada, and becomes Dracula. All right. Now Winona Ryder plays Mina in the 19th century when most of the action of this takes place. But she's also in the late 1400s in Dracula world. She is Dracula's queen, right? She is his wife, Elisabetta. So the whole deal with this movie is there's this kind of reincarnation thing happening. Well, not reincarnation is the wrong word. It's kind of like, it's like Finnegan's Wake, or what else? You know how in Finnegan's Wake, it's like there's a germ of the story and the characters, which kind of is like takes place pre-time, which is Finnegan, the fall of Finnegan, all this kind of stuff. It's kind of like the germ of the story. And then that germ then plays out in familiar historical time in the actual book. So the same thing here. You have this kind of pre-historical setup with Dracula and his wife, this priest, right? And then him becoming Dracula and all this kind of this dark web of prehistorical spiritual karma that's generated. And then all of that plays out in familiar historical time in the 19th century. So it's interesting because, it is to our Western consciousness, it is a prehistorical, the late 1400s in Eastern Europe, in sort of falling Byzantium, is sort of pre-historical of our era, right? Because you think this is just around the fall of Constantinople. This is the end of the medieval period proper, is what this is, right? It still takes place in the kind of dream space of the Middle Ages. Whereas in the West, the West is ascendant, right? The West is reaching the culmination of the Renaissance. This is the same generation as Christopher Columbus. So the West is on the brink of the New World, on the brink of the Reformation, on the brink of entering into familiar historical time and psychological space. Whereas this, with Dracula, his priest, this whole story about his queen being lost and him swearing vengeance and renouncing God, all this kind of stuff, this takes place in this kind of other space, this kind of pre-temporal space, prehistorical space. And then it is played out in the modern Western world. Okay. So now Dracula, his coming into the modern world Dracula is like I was going to say an antichrist, but he's like He's an inverted Christ is what happens, right? Because in his rage about his queen dying, he takes the chalice, okay, and he takes the blood in the chalice, and as a kind of inverted Eucharist, he drinks to his resurrection, but for the sake of evil, right? So he becomes this figure, like he says, I shall rise from my own death, right? So literally paralleling the image of Christ and taking the chalice and drinking the blood of life, the blood of eternal life. But in order to swear revenge against God and to just unleash all the powers of demonic hellaciousness on the earth. Now, this queen sort of reincarnates as Mina Murray. Okay. Now, Mina Murray is sort of the chaste young maiden. Okay. She is a proper Christian, virtuous young woman. Virginal, pure, slightly naive, but serious about life and about to be married. Okay. And the whole story arc of this movie is the Mina is the most complex character in this movie. The whole thing hinges on her, basically. She is part reincarnation and represents the kind of the virginal young maiden archetype. But she also is the resurrection of this dark queen, Dracula's, lover. And she, in the movie, she kind of becomes both of these things fused into. She becomes sort of the ultimate archetype of womanhood as a whole thing. And she is a key part in uncoiling and undoing this evil karmic, this dark karmic knot that is set up in the initial part of the movie. So Mina, as this young maiden, she is getting to marry this guy. This is Jonathan Harker. Now, Jonathan Harker is, a well-to-do. Again, he is like the proper Christian Western man, virtuous, self-possessed, intelligent, right? And he is engaged to Mina. So the way I see this is Jonathan is sort of represents, well, let me back up. Dracula represents the old man, okay? What Dracula is the full embracing of the passionate man, the Adamic man, the full rejection of God, the full fallen, passionate man. He even has this, I love this. He's, in this first scene when he's rejecting God, he's got on this armor suit that looks like muscle. He's like, he is the embodiment of absolute Adamhood, absolute pre-salvation fallen man, just 100% swearing absolute allegiance to the passionate nature against God. Jonathan is like the closest to the new man that Western civilization has produced. He is civilized, right? He is virtuous. And in very important ways that we'll see, okay? It's not a facade. I mean, he really is. He has overcome a lot of his passionate nature, right? And become a properly Christian Western man, okay? Now, Mina has this friend, Lucy. Lucy is sort of the opposite of Mina's type. She's the young maiden who is the unchaste young maiden. Now, she is virginal and she is still pure, but she has completely indulged her passionate, unrestrained nature and completely failed to develop the kind of strength of character and completely failed to kind of take life seriously and take these moral issues seriously. She's playful, she's silly, she has no capacity for self-control. She doesn't even realize the value of self-control. She's just out there. And we see this when it comes down to it, because when temptation comes along, Lucy's just gone. She has no capacity for self-control. So even though she's technically virgin, it doesn't matter. And this is what I draw an Orthodox lesson from. It's like your status as a, sinner or undefiled or whatever, it's not as simple as just your static, state as what you are. It all has to do with kind of a life of habits that you've acquired and all of the things that have constructed your character. Mina and Lucy are both young. They're like basically children. I think they say Lucy's 20 in this movie. So they're both, 19, 20. But Mina has obviously spent her youth training her character and developing a moral compass and developing self-control and all these things. So she is actually able to meet the challenges and meet this struggle and this journey that she has taken on in this story. Whereas Lucy, as soon as temptation comes along, she's gone. She's just gone. And then she has no capacity to get out of it. And she ends up very badly. So that's Lucy. Now, the other sort of main interesting character is Van Helsing, who is the reincarnation of this priest. Okay. This priest, both played by Anthony Hopkins. Now, I think this is very interesting, right? And I've always thought about the fact that Anthony Hopkins plays this priest in this kind of pre-modern intro, and then he plays Van Helsing. And I never really put together what that's all about. But I'm reading this thing purely in terms of for the sake of this video, purely in terms of dream terms. Okay, so if the actor who played the priest shows up, well, then that's a reincarnation. It's not a coincidence. Okay. So Van Helsing is a man of the Enlightenment. In the beginning of the movie, he's giving a lecture to students about disease. And he obviously he's a doctor. Okay, he's dissected corpses. Okay, this is a modern man. Okay, kind of no nonsense, a lover of life, well educated. Okay, but also he has all this kind of esoteric knowledge, which is really spiritual knowledge about vampires and about Dracula. And Dracula is sort of who he's been pursuing his whole life. Dracula is the passionate man. Dracula is the embodied Adam. He is the man who has utterly rejected the gift of salvation, right? That is the man that this man is trying to contain and pursue, okay? Well, this priest, what is his job? The priest's job is to contain and direct the passionate man, right? That's what the priest is trying to do for anybody in the church, right? The priest is trying to get all of us to overcome that Adamic nature and to overcome the passions, right? So I realized, of course the priest reincarnates because he failed at his job. He didn't contain Dracula. He did not contain the passionate man. He did not shape him and help him and steward him correctly. And this passionate man had an absolute freak out and went so far as to reject God, as to actually drink the cup, to drink the chalice to damnation. Okay. And anyone who's Orthodox knows what this is about, right? I mean, just read the pre-communion prayers, all right? Yeah, you can drink the cup to damnation. Yeah, that's a thing. That's a thing to be very careful of. So what's fascinating about this is there's also a kind of eschatological idea here. And this is, listen, also, let me just disclaimer, I do not speak for the Orthodox Church, okay? This is, everything I'm saying is, if I get into theology, it's just wild speculative theology. Don't take any of this as like an Orthodox position. But I'm reading this as like a dreamscape that to me associates with all this Orthodox anthropology and soteriology. So, okay, Dracula is like an inverse resurrection. He's like an inverted Christ. Okay, he resurrects. He rises from his own death, right? But solely for the pursuit of evil and to inflict evil upon the world, right? Well, I mean, there, a bit of speculative theology goes like this. All people are resurrected. The resurrection is universal, right? Because Christ redeemed universal human nature. Nobody will actually die. Like everybody will experience the resurrection. But the righteous will experience it as bliss, and those who hate God will experience it as a torment. Okay, well, here's Dracula. This is he who is experiencing the resurrection as torment, right? Because he has turned himself as far away in hatred of God as he can. So he's resurrected. He does survive the grave, right? But his whole existence is torment. His only capacity is for inflicting evil and loosing demonic powers into the world, right? So, okay, those are the characters. Now let's get into a little bit of this actual story here, okay? So here's Dracula. I'm going to try not to play too much of this so I don't get bopped. Here's Dracula realizing that his queen has killed herself, right? He comes home from battle, victorious in battle. And what's happened? His queen is dead, okay? So this man is in the absolute peak of grief. He is in a absolutely, the most psychically potent state he could be in at this moment, in church, surrounded by his priest and these deacons, right? And the priest tells him, this is what's so interesting to me. This is the priest, okay? The priest tells him, not only is she dead, she's damned. She is damned. She's condemned to hell because she took her own life. All right. This is what triggers Dracula's absolute freak out. Okay. He's in this extremely delicate state. Okay. Where he could really go any way. Anything could push him in any direction. Okay. And what does the priest do? Again, what's the priest's job? The priest's job is to guide and lead his flock out of the passionate nature, right? So the priest's job in this moment, an extremely delicate moment where this man has just lost his beloved, right? What's he going to say? Is he going to offer words of comfort? Is he going to, how is he going to help? But he doesn't help. He just, with no thought and no feeling for the situation and nothing, he just says, Dracula, oh yeah, she's going to hell too. How do you like, too bad. So the way I see this is this priest completely fails at his job, and it sets this whole thing in motion, okay? Because Dracula, once he says that, Dracula has a full-on freak out. And here you see him swearing, vengeance toward God and drinking the chalice to damnation, right? So what's going on here? There's a lot going on here. Okay, first of all, how does this whole darkness get set up? Okay, well, first of all, the queen is initiating this thing in a way because she's the one who hears that Dracula died and then throws herself into the river. Okay. So you could say, okay, that she made the mistake because her passion for Dracula, her love for Dracula was stronger than her piety. Right? So for her, the grief of losing him was sufficient to break her piety and break her love of God so that she was unable to live with this and she committed suicide. Right? Then Dracula comes home. Okay. His wife is dead. Dracula too. He loves his wife more than he loves God. And losing her causes him to totally lose his center and be in a position where he's just about ready to reject God. So that's Dracula's mistake. Okay. The priest, in this moment of crisis, does just about the worst thing he can do. He plays God. He says what no priest or Orthodox person or Christian person is supposed to do, which is to say who's going to hell and who's not going to hell. Okay. At the moment when it's the worst possible time, you could say that to a man. So the priest violates that ethos, and he just makes this legalistic proclamation, okay, causing Dracula to have a complete freak out and become Dracula. All right. So now this whole thing has been set up because of the sins or the errors of the queen, of Dracula, and of his priest. Okay. Now all of these characters are going to reincarnate or resurrect in some form in the modern world, and this whole thing is going to get played out. Okay. This dark karmic knot is going to have to get unraveled, right? Because God is working out all things or something like that. Okay. So that's the setup. All right. And here's what's interesting about this. The priest tells Dracula she's damned. She's in hell. Okay. But lo and behold, we have a movie. The queen reincarnates. She's not damned. And this was puzzling to me at why, but at first, but then when you watch it and you find out why. Okay. And this says something about, a legalistic way of evaluating who's going to heaven or who's going to hell. Okay. So let's dig in a little bit into this plot. Now, I didn't go through all the characters. This guy's Renfield, who was the first guy that was sent to. Now we're in the modern world. Okay, we're in the modern world, or 19th century London, modern. Okay, and Dracula is living in his castle, east, as far east as you can go, at the edge of the world, essentially, for the West. It's as far east as you can go before you're in, funny looking people land. It's as far east as you can go where it's still hanging on to Christendom. Okay. Edge of the world. Dracula's at the edge of the world in his dark, 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 evil castle, just doing dark, evil things, right? And biding his time. Renfield is the first guy who's sent out to try to do business with Dracula by this firm that Dracula is using to buy up land in London, right? Renfield, basically, the way I read it is Renfield has a false recognition. He sees Dracula as Christ, basically. He calls him the master of all life. So Dracula is this like inverted Christ who was experienced an inverted resurrection from this inverted Eucharist, right? But he is deceiving to anybody who doesn't know better. So Renfield is like a cautionary tale. Renfield comes across this figure who is very powerful, who has risen from his own death, who has all of these abilities. He can see things, he can move things, he can control people, he can give life of a sort. Renfield is deluded by this and thinks that Dracula is Christ, basically calls him the master of all life. So Renfield, he's come back to England, but he's locked in an insane asylum because everybody's like, can see that this guy's completely lost it. And he's just waiting for Dracula to show up so he can serve him. So that's Renfield, and there's some more characters we'll get to, but okay, so this is Harker and Mina. Okay, so Jonathan Harker is called away to Dracula to replace Renfield, right? He's sent on this mission by this firm to go and sign these contracts with Dracula. Okay, so this is, now I said Dracula is the passionate man. He's the old man. Harker is the new man, or at least as close to the new man as 19th century Western civilization has been able to produce. Okay. Now I see them as being kind of like two sides of the same coin, or kind of two versions of a total man, right? For a few reasons. One, they're both, one because of this Winona Ryder thing, right? Like both of them are, her character is kind of the welding together of this virtuous young maiden and this resurrected dark queen, right? And Dracula is sort of the husband of one half of those side, and Harker is the husband of the other half of the side. And in this mode, they are the young virtuous couple. They've only kissed. Mina lets us know this in a scene where she's talking to Lucy. So they're pure. They're doing their courtship properly. Okay, they're both upstanding, serious, sober-minded young people. Okay. Dracula is the husband of like this resurrected queen, this passionate woman nature, right? And also I say this because what happens, okay, Harker goes off to Dracula's castle. There it is. It's like Mordor, right? It's the edge of the West or the East or whatever Mordor is. You know what I mean? It's the edge of the world, okay? Harker goes off. So again, I see Harker and Dracula as kind of like two sides of the same coin because they both, Harker's the only character that goes and resides in Dracula's world. He's the only, character that, they're both involved with Winona Ryder and they both go and inhabit this Dracula world, okay? And they have completely different relationships to it. For Dracula, this place that you're seeing, this hell, this hellish Mordor place, for Dracula, this is home, okay? This is his home. This is his homeland. This is where he's comfortable. This is where he draws his power from. For Jonathan, this place is just a horrific, evil nightmare, and he just cannot wait for it to be over. Okay. So they both, they're like two different experiences of man living in this sinful place. For the passionate man, it's wonderful. All the goodies are here. For the new man, this is a place where you do not want to be. Only bad things will happen here. Okay. Now here's what's interesting about this. Okay, this is another Orthodox idea, all right? As opposed to like a Calvinist model of like elect, non-elect, or some kind of like static, character analysis, all right? An Orthodox anthropology would say something more like, even the most evil, corrupted, fallen, vicious, satanic person still has some little sliver of light in them. As long as they draw breath, salvation is still a possibility. And we're going to see that with the character of Dracula. That also means that even in the most upright, virtuous, spiritually advanced, sober man, there is still that little seed of passion and evil that can threaten to undo you, right? Now, the whole course of this movie is about Dracula's redemption. But right now, we're going to see one of the things driving this, that drives the forward action of this in the modern world, is Jonathan's little speck of spiritual weakness, which comes up here. They're in this castle. Jonathan is basically made to live there by Dracula. Okay. Now let me back up, because there's a question here. It's like, well, okay, Jonathan seems innocent here. I mean, he's just on this errand. He didn't like make a sinful choice that landed him in Dracula's castle. Watching it this time, I disagree. I see it a different way, and here's why. In the very first scene of the movie that takes place in the modern world, the very first scene of the movie, which I'm trying to find it. I'm not going to find it because, oh, there it is. Okay. In this scene right here, this is the first scene. This is Jonathan Harker, and he's sitting in the nice big office at the firm where he works. Okay. And he's sitting with the head honcho, and the head honcho says, "Listen, young man, I have a job for you. This is a heavy duty job, blah, 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 blah. But you know what? You do this for me, you scratch my, guess what? Your future is going to be fine at this firm. Okay. And so I read that as, okay, well, what is it? This somehow what's happening here is an appeal to, at the deepest level of Jonathan, where there's still this passionate man. This is, yes, the virtuous part of him is thinking like, this will allow me to provide for my family. This will allow me to be a responsible person and have a good job. Okay. But there's also that part of him, when you get the big offer from the big boss in the big room, that's like, oh, you know what? This is going to make my life good. I'm going to get to do some good stuff. I'm going to look good doing this. It's like mammon. Like there's a mammon element in this thing. There's like a worldly ambition, some little thing that's playing at the very bottom that then takes him into Dracula's world. Okay. So again, it's not simple, right? The human heart is no simple thing. And so for essentially, there's a kind of innocence where Jonathan is not fully culpable for what's about to happen, because he is like, the virtuous side of him is trying to do the right thing. It's just that there's the seed of evil that's also working about this job offer. Okay. So, and I say that because he ends up in Dracula's castle, this little nightmare, horrific world, right? And he ends up, some of this is not appropriate for YouTube, my friends. While Harker's in this castle, he ends up becoming like the sex slave of the evil vampiresses that hang out at the castle. Right. So now this is going to be very important later on. This is very interesting. Okay. So he basically allows this infidelity to happen with these vampires. Okay. And I call it infidelity because that's what Van Helsing calls it later in the movie. When Harker finally gets out of this situation, Van Helsing refers to it as, during your infidelity with those she-demons or whatever. So like, yes, Harker is like, it's like he's gotten the big job and he's on the road, and, some stuff happens on the road. You know what I'm saying? It's like that kind of thing. Right. But again, as we'll see for Harker, it's like, these are sins that are forgivable. Okay. Because it's something that's happening. It's not him. Right. And he is not identified with it, because when Van Helsing says, during your infidelity with those she-demons, did you ever, even for a moment, taste of their blood? And Harker very honestly and very straightforward is like, no, of course not. No. Okay. which means that, yes, he has sinned, like sins have come forward as he's navigating his path as the new man, right? But not for 1 second is he identified with those. It's like there's a weakness in him that has caused this to happen that he couldn't really do anything about, right? But not for a moment did he identify with it and drink the damnation blood, right? So he emerges from all of this sullied, like his hair is white, right? Sullied, but essentially unscathed. And crucially, Mina forgives him. Okay. The whole crux of how this whole thing gets worked out is the marriage between Jonathan and Mina. And we'll like look into that as we go. Okay. So now we see, now Jonathan is still stuck in the she-demon pit, getting drained of his blood and his vitality because he's given into this she-demon temptation, right? He's still on the road. Mina back home, what's very interesting is she seems to sort of summon Dracula. This is the scene where Dracula's shadow begins to fall over her. Now he knows that she's here now because he's seen her photograph in Jonathan's luggage. And he must have known that that her reincarnation was coming because he was making these plans to buy up property in London. Okay, so he knows that this is sort of the incarnation of his bride, right? That is his love that started this whole thing, that really is what he really wants, although he's so twisted now. His actions only manifest evil, and he can only really do sin, and he can only really just loose demonic powers onto things, right? But underneath all that, as we'll see, in that tiny little sliver of good in him, it's like what he really wants is the love and acceptance and forgiveness of his queen, right? So in this scene, this is when Mina you start to see her little compromise in her moral uprightness, because she's watching Lucy at a party, and Lucy's being frivolous and flirting with men because Lucy doesn't have any sense. She's just a silly little, what do you call it? What's the word for like totally silly woman? whatever that word is, that's Lucy. Mina's watching her, and she has a little moment of jealousy. She's watching Lucy. This is like a little tempting voice comes in where she's watching Lucy, who's totally not somebody you should be jealous of, but she sees Lucy's kind of ease and freedom from anxiety, and simplicity. And Mina starts having these thoughts of like, oh, I wish I could be more like that. She has these kind of jealous thoughts. And as soon as she has those thoughts, the shadow falls on her. And it's almost like she's summoning Dracula with her kind of darker nature. And as we'll see, now they're like, ooh, there he is. As we see now, she will begin to kind of manifest this dark queen archetype out of her. So let's get a little bit ahead here. Okay, I'm glad it skipped that. This is Harker when the vampiresses are tormenting him, and then they eat a baby. So probably the most horrifying scene in the thing. Okay, yada yada do, yada yada dee. Okay, Dracula now arrives in London. Okay, and now he is young again. Okay, so these characters, okay, Mina is like the reincarnation of this queen, but she's not yet manifested the full kind of resurrected dark queen in her. Dracula is not a reincarnation. He straight up is resurrected. He survived his own death. Okay. And the priest / Van Helsing, who will come along in a minute, I read as also a reincarnation. So here's Mina, and then she spots Dracula in the crowd. And then they start chit-chatting. Now, as he's talking to her, we start to see this other side of her start to come out, and she starts to feel very conflicted and uncomfortable with herself, right? That young maiden archetype in her is starting to have this deeper life thing come out of her that she doesn't fully understand, right? like I said, she's a virgin. She's not yet married. She's only kissed Jonathan. She's young. She's unexperienced in the world. And along comes Dracula, and he is, a deeply charming, deeply charismatic, overwhelmingly so. And he starts talking to her and working on her, and he's trying to like show her kind of like who she really is. But he's very gentle about it. Now, this is when we see when he starts interacting with this character, Mina, then you start to see that Dracula is not so simple. He's not just a straight up satanic evil thing. It's like, no, there is something underneath where there's still this layer of good, like Darth Vader kind of thing. Now, these guys are Lucy's suitors, okay? The guy on the left is the dude from The Princess Bride. The guy in the middle is just some Texan, some rich Texan. The guy on the right is a doctor who's also addicted to heroin, morphine, who is also the doctor of Renfield. He's Renfield's doctor. So he's trying to understand what's happening in all this stuff. Okay. Specifically, these guys are all Lucy's suitors. Okay. Now, Lucy, like I said, who has totally failed to develop any seriousness or moral character in her life, as soon as Dracula shows up in London, she falls to his temptation. And not only has a rendezvous with him in the form of a wild beast who makes wild beast love to her in the rain, but also she drinks his blood, like right away. She drinks his blood. She starts becoming a vampire. Okay, she has no self-control, right? And there is no repentance that's really going to happen with her. She'll have little flashes as she goes down the dark path where she'll be like trying to say something good, but basically she's done. She's toast. She's just going to walk that dark path, and she has completely failed to inculcate any kind of good habits or self-control in herself that would keep her from getting sucked down this thing. So she's the cautionary tale. So the doctor, the guy on the right, he's trying to figure out what is happening with Lucy because she starts to seem diseased, and she's like having fits, and she's losing blood, and she's craving blood and all this stuff. That's how he ends up calling in Van Helsing, who's the reincarnation of this priest, whose job that he failed at in this prehistorical episode is to contain and ultimately defeat the passionate man, who is Dracula. So here's Dracula. He's still working on her. Now she's starting to, Mina, this thing is starting to open up in her that she doesn't understand. This deeper thing, which is the Dark Queen, this, this deeper archetype that this young maiden is not, that is coming upon her, and she doesn't understand it. Okay. And she's resisting because she's supposed to be getting married to Jonathan. Right. And here comes this guy who is like bringing out this thing in her that she's never experienced before. Right. So now here comes the reincarnated priest in the form of this enlightenment, man of the Enlightenment, doctor. Right. And he sets about trying to figure out what's happening here. He starts treating Lucy, and immediately he knows what's going on. He knows what's going on. She is showing, because like I said, he's not just a doctor. He has all this esoteric knowledge and spiritual knowledge because he's the priest, right? He knows what's happening here on a spiritual level, right? And he's back, and he's got to finish the job. Right? He's got to contain and defeat the passionate man, the foe he's been pursuing all his life, right? So he's treating, now here's, Lucy's having a fit, okay? And all of these vampire fits that she's having, and all of this, anytime someone is like, got their like vampire nature coming on, or anytime anybody's feeling temptation because Dracula's around, it's all very sexual, okay? So there's another theme of like lust. It's kind of this main carrier of that passionate nature that Dracula is sworn to, right? It's his one power over creation, right? Because he is fully just an agent of Satan, and that is Satan's only power over people, is to exploit their passions, right? And lust is like the most exploitable one. So that undercurrent of lust is like the thing that threatens to undo all the civilized layers on top of it, right? That's kind of a main idea here. In fact, Van Helsing gives a speech. The first scene where Van Helsing shows up, he's giving a lecture to medical students, and he makes a joke about syphilis, and he says how, what do you say? Civilization and civilization have, grown up together. They're like wedded in, which is a comment on Western civilization. So he kind of explains what's happening to everybody. He's like, okay, Lucy's becoming a vampire. No big deal. We'll just have to drive a stake through her heart and cut her head off. It's all going to be good. And everybody's like, what are you talking about? You crazy person. So meanwhile, Dracula, and because Jonathan's not back yet, okay, he's still enslaved by these horrible, evil, demoness creatures in the castle. That's a great Halloween shot. So Dracula, meanwhile, is getting closer to Mina. And in this scene, he takes her out and they drink absinthe, and she starts kind of getting in a trip state. And then he really kind of starts telling her like who he really is, what she really is. He starts giving her visions of his homeland. And this is where you start to realize that like there's something much deeper going on here, like about the love between Dracula and this queen, is this very real thing. And you start to have a little bit of sympathy for the situation that occurred at the beginning of the movie, because it's all tied in with like this homeland and this life, this beautiful place, right? And that he had, and the two of them is these, operating as defenders of the Christian faith and the life they must have had together before this terrible tragedy happened. And he's describing the beauty of the countryside and all this kind of stuff. And she starts to like remember, the Dark Queen in her starts to kind of like remember who she really is and what's happening here. And she doesn't totally understand it, but we're starting to see that Dracula is not just a straight up evil monster, right? There's something else going on here. And there's something about their relationship that's going to be the center to undoing this dark karmic knot that has pervaded into historical space. So finally, Jonathan escapes. Okay. And he makes it into a monastery and finds shelter. And then he waits, and then Mina goes to him. Right. In fact, this is Lucy's last moment of like clarity. And one of the few things she does, and to help push this plot along, is that little bit of good that's still left in her just is saying to Mina, like, go, do not stay here. You have to go. You have to marry Jonathan. You have to, like, that is more important than anything going on here. Forget about me. Like, I'm lost. You have to go, and you have to marry Jonathan. Okay. So she does. So Mina goes off. And Lucy's freaking out. She's a vampire trying to kill everybody. Mina writes Dracula like a goodbye note, being like, "I'm gone to go marry my husband. I'm sorry, I'll never see you again." And he's got this like meatloaf moment here. And he's gonna freak out and he's gonna rage and he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna kill everybody." Okay, so okay, now all right, Lucy. Okay, now here's the thing. The whole crux of this thing and the way this is all going to get undone has to do with the marriage between Jonathan and Mina. Okay, every character in this thing goes through some kind of redemption arc or repentance arc, right? Because that's how you undo the old man. That's how you undo the passionate nature that still has a grip, that still has an undercurrent in the civilized world, right? That's how you undo that. And the most powerful form of that is a real marriage, real Christian marriage, right? So you've got this nice, there's Dracula going, and I think that's where he finally kills Mina. Oh, there's some boobies. I shouldn't be showing that on YouTube. You didn't see that. Okay, so here's Mina and Jonathan being crowned as Lucy is being killed. So as this like vixen character is finally just dying, this marriage is taking place in this monastery between Jonathan and Mina. Okay. So this is super, super crucial. Okay. Like I said, Jonathan has fallen into some sin. Okay. But crucially, Mina and Van Helsing go and rescue him, and Mina forgives him. Okay. Because like I said, Van Helsing asks him, "Did you for a moment ever taste their blood?" And he's, no, of course not. Right. So what he did is like, Mina is acknowledging the little fallen part, the little weak part in this man. She's accepting it. Okay. She's accepting his humanity, and she's okay with it. Now, essentially, that really deep part of her has to do the same thing with Dracula, right? But in terms of this marriage, okay, I mean, that's what marriage is. Okay, it's the man and woman accepting the things the bad parts of each other in forgiveness. Okay, that's Christian marriage. Okay, that's the crucial thing, right? And it's crucial because he is going to have to forgive her too when she goes and carries out her destiny that she has to carry out in order to redeem Dracula. They both are going to have to forgive each other because they're both involved in screwiness and hanky-panky with evil. All right. But they do, because it's like a real marriage, right? It's not about, the essence of a Christian marriage is that it's not about communication and passion and excitement and all this stuff. It's like when you get down to the layer of like accepting the humanity of each other and forgiving each other for their fallenness and that kind of thing. Okay. So they have this, right? Okay. Now there's Lucy getting killed. Okay. So these guys go and they kill Lucy in vampire form. She's gone. She's a vampire. All right. She's like eating kids and stuff. So they go open up her coffin, drive a stake through her heart, kill her. And one of the creepiest parts of the movie, this is Van Helsing asking, did you taste of their blood at all? And he's like, no, of course not. Wouldn't do such a thing. Duh. And then, okay, yada, yada, yada. Long story short, we're getting to the end here. We're almost done. Okay, so this now finally, now Mina says something to the effect of, okay, Dracula comes to her while she's sleeping. Okay. Now, after the marriage, her marriage to Jonathan, Mina has this line from her diary where she says something about, now that I'm married to Jonathan, I'm starting to understand something deeper about what's going on with Dracula. Okay. Now this is tough because it's like, if you're reading this as like two different men, it's like, well, she just got married. She's cheating on him with Dracula. She's still in love with Dracula. What? It's like, no. Jonathan and Dracula are the same. They're like two sides of one coin, right? You have to read this like a dream. Okay. In the dream, you're Dracula and you're Jonathan. Okay. In the dream, the woman is the chaste young maiden and the resurrected Dark Queen. Okay. So now she says, now that I'm married to Jonathan, I understand something. What it means is that now that she has lost her V card, okay, now and like opened up to another depth of life, she's starting to this thing that he had kind of presented to her that she was starting to understand. She's really clear about it now, and now she's starting to understand something about, not as Mina, but as the Dark Queen, as Elizabetha, the depth of the love that she and Prince Dracula had together. Okay. And how that is the key to undoing all this darkness that's happened. Right. And so Mina, what happens is, like I said, Mina is the most complex character in this whole thing, and she's the most interesting one because she's kind of like all the female archetype kind of integrated. And basically what it is she proves the ultimate criteria of womanhood or wifehood, which is sort of faithfulness and loyalty, unconditional loyalty and faithfulness, right? Because Dracula comes, okay, in this scene, you know, and he basically, in this moment, we see Dracula's little flash of repentance. Because finally now Mina understands what's happening now, okay? And Dracula, she finally confronts Dracula and she says, tell me who you are, really. Who are you really? And Dracula, who is the passionate man, he's that side, he's the old man, he's Adam. He finally says, he kind of tells the truth about himself, and it's like a repentance. He says, I'm nothing. I'm just this shell. I'm this empty nothingness, you know, for all of his power and all of his impressiveness and his charisma and all this stuff. Like he says, when she asks him, I'm nothing. And he owns up to being the force of evil that's driving all this horrible crap in the movies. Like I'm the thing that they're trying to kill. I'm the thing that stalks time and history. I'm the, you know, I'm the thing that causes all the bad things, and I'm nothing. I'm just, you know, nothing, right? So not only is he the perpetrator, not only has he sworn allegiance and done the worst thing he can do, he's unleashed untellable horror on the world, right? At the cost of lives and just, you know, demons roaming around London and all this. Not only has he done all that, but he's also owned up to being what he really is as a man, which is nothing, just this empty nothing. Okay, he's the worst possible thing that a man could present a woman when she says, what are you really? And what does she do? She accepts him totally as the queen, as this dark queen from this thing. She accepts him totally. And she's like, I don't care. I don't care. She is the epitome of endurance, duration, loyalty. In the I Ching, right, what does it say about womanhood and wifehood? The core of it is duration, right? The ability to endure, right? Because a woman has to put up with the Adamic nature in man, right? And what women cannot do, broadly speaking, in our current culture is like, when presented with the frailties and the faults in man, to accept and love him anyway, right? Usually that leads to some kind of rejection, which is why all these, young dudes going around preaching red pill and stuff, like, they don't understand. They think they can just like not be weak and like women will never reject them. It's like, well, it doesn't matter what you can bench, how charismatic you are, how much power you have, how much money you have, blah, 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 blah. There's still a part of you that any woman that you are seriously with for a long enough amount of time is going to find that is that old man. And what's she going to do when she finds it? Well, Mina accepts him completely. And he even shows, he goes a step further in his repentance because he has the opportunity to turn her into a vampire. And he's like, I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't. Even though like you're all that I've wanted this whole time, like I can't curse you with that kind of life because I know what it is for me. It's just nothing. I'm a nothing. And if I do this to you, you'll be a nothing too. And it won't matter. I can't do that to you. So Dracula has this kind of repentance thing, and she's like with him. She's like, I'm with you. I don't care. She'll, I'll be what you are. I'm in it. I'm in it. So she drinks his blood. Okay. Now we're in the last little bit here. Okay. Now Mina is starting to turn vampiric. Okay. And Dracula has gone back to his homeland. Okay. There's a great commentary about the state of the right wing in the character of Dracula. Okay, what is Dracula? He's the old man. He's the passionate man. Okay, and what is he obsessed with? His race and his homeland. Okay, he's all about. He's got this whole blood and soil thing. He's always on about. He's always talking about, well, the great race of my people are now. He's mad. He's mad because the great race of his people are now just a memory. Right? It sounds like literally all the right-wing rhetoric you hear on Twitter every single day. Okay. And what does he have to do? He's got to literally carry around the soil of his homeland everywhere he goes in order to like maintain his strength. Right? Because he's so, the passionate old man is so delusionally attached to that blood, soil, and race thing. Okay. So that's the bad guy in this movie, you guys. Okay. Just FYI. Anyways, Dracula's on his way back to his castle. Right. They take Mina there as like bait. And they're like, we're going to kill this guy once and for all. All right. So, like I said, every character has their temptation and their fallenness and then their repentance. Okay. So now we get to the priest. Okay. The priest failed at his job the first time around, and now he's got to contain and defeat the passionate man, which is embodied in Dracula. Okay. But he too is not perfect. And in this scene, he's with Mina, like he's taken Mina off to this castle, and it's just the two of them. And they're literally parked in the courtyard of Dracula's castle, right? And the evil vampiresses are there, and they start to cast their evil lust spell around this thing. And Mina is inspired by this, and she starts coming on to Van Helsing. And he starts going into this like trance, like he can't think. He starts getting like he loses himself, and he ends up making out with Mina. Okay. But what does he do? Again, it's like these are kind of like forgivable sins, There's no drinking of the blood here, right? And what does he do immediately after this? He breaks the spell, by the way. He takes a communion wafer and shoves it into her forehead, and she backs off. And what does he do? He wakes up the next morning, goes and finds the vampiresses sleeping and cuts their heads off. So it's like, what is this priest doing? He's taking the kingdom by force, is what he's doing, right? So he's fixing his part in this, but really what he's got to do is defeat Dracula. So they're chasing down Dracula back to his castle. The sun's going down, yada, yada, do. They finally get to him, and they're going to get him, and bam, and the sun goes down, and boom, ciao, bam. All right. So Dracula gets a mortal blow, and then they shove this blade through his heart. Jonathan strikes this is crucial. Jonathan strikes the mortal blow, okay? Because Jonathan is the new man. Jonathan is administering the death blow to the old man, okay? He has to do it. But what's so much more important, and this is where the whole film hinges, okay, is on this marriage between Jonathan and Mina. Mina forgave Jonathan because yes, his sinful nature was exploited and he fell to it, but he never tasted the blood, okay? He's not fallen, all right? He just still has that little portion of that weak man in him, okay, that he's out to destroy. Mina, after they've gotten married, has gone and basically done this infidelity with Dracula. She's drank his blood and all this kind of stuff. Now, the most crucial thing in this whole thing is they're on the train to this scene right here. And Mina is like begging him for forgiveness. She's like, she's begging him for forgiveness, and he takes responsibility for it. He's like, no, this is my fault. I started this whole thing. Right. And in that act, like that is the act of like the true Christian, right? Take all blames into oneself, right? Blame yourself for what's happening, right? Don't blame anybody else. It's not her fault. Like he's like, no, this is my fault. I mean, he's the one that committed infidelity in the first place with these evil vampire, which is, I don't care what degree of sin it was. Like it's still like, sort of he karmically initiated this in a sense. He brought about this old man or whatever. So, and crucially, when it comes down to it, They're just about to fire this rifle at Dracula. And Jonathan stops the whole thing. He says, stop. Because Dracula kind of falls into Mina's arms right at the doors of the church. And right when they're about to take a shot at him, Jonathan calls it off. And he's like, no, stop. Jonathan stops the war. Okay? These other characters, these guy characters, they're just men of the age. They're just basically trying to do the right thing, right? They're history bound. And that's all fine and good. But Jonathan, the new man, he stops the war. Now, Jonathan has every reason in the world to hate Dracula, who's taking his wife away from him. He has every reason in the world to put the nail in the coffin. Okay. He struck that first blow at the throat. Okay. If anybody has a right to finish this job, it would be Jonathan, but he stops and he says, no. And he lets Mina go with Dracula because he knows it's not about him and it's not about her and it's not about Dracula. It's not about any of this stuff. It's about God. And it's about what's right. And it's about undoing this dark knot that's been tied prior to historical time. He lets them go. And finally, in this last moment where Dracula is still raging that God has forsaken him, Mina fully shows her unconditional devotion and love for this man in spite of everything he's done, all the evil he's perpetrated, his own confession of being empty, hollow, and the fact that he is still, in spite of all of that, come and continued in the dark path right up until the last moment. And she finally, her total devotion, her totalized love for him, unconditional, gets through to him in the last minute. And it has this heart opening. And finally, there's a heart opening and the Holy Spirit pours in. And finally, there's a redemption and rest for Dracula. And just at the last second, right there, there's redemption. Okay. So that's that. So yeah, I don't really have anything else to say about it. It's essentially the story of the old man versus the new man. A priest who failed to manage this properly. And ultimately the redemptive sacrament of marriage being the thing that united and transcended this old man, new man thing, and the old man was able to be redeemed. And the role that woman plays in that. And like I said, the Mina Elizabetha character is like the heart of this film. You know, it's her journey to go on and her persistence in the true quality of essential womanhood, which is unconditional devotion and loyalty and love. So that's a little Halloween boo fest for you. I hope everybody has a happy, safe Halloween. And see you next time.